Greetings, human beings, and welcome to a brief bonus episode of Apartment 303. My name is Dave, and alongside my co-host Adam, we are here today to officially announce the start of hashtag 6 seasons and a bracket. Over the next several weeks, we will be pitting 64 of the best episodes of Community against one another in a March Madness-style bracket extravaganza. Starting with our very next episode, we will be hashing out each region one by one with the help of many of our fellow community podcasters and opinion havers. Along the way, we will, of course, also be needing your help and input in order to determine which episodes advance and why. So, before I get too carried away into the details and how we plan to sort through all of this, Adam, my friend, tell me a little bit more about how all this came to be and, more specifically, how you ended up with the official bracket and seedings.
Well, I solve all of my problems by using brackets. So that's, this is a Tuesday for me. And I'd had the idea for a while since we really got going with the podcast. And I had to kind of sit on it for a little bit. But I realized that it was such a great idea. And obviously we started talking about it in January because of, my level of excitement, of course. And it just seems like a lot of fun, especially last year with coronavirus prohibiting the NCAA from going forward with their tournament. So, I've been trying to fill that gap in my life for a long time. I have been a avid college basketball fan, as I've mentioned on the show before. And this takes something else that I love and combines it with brackets and college basketball. So I couldn't be happier.
Yeah, when you first brought up the idea, I was thinking about it in the context of a pitch for an episode. And just listening to you talk for a couple minutes about it, I realized quickly that this thing had, kind of a life of its own. One episode was not going to do it justice, so we have been planning to do a little bit of an arc here. And we're going to start early in February. We're going to end late in April. And we're going to spend all of March really hashing through all of this and trying to enjoy every second of the way. So the bracket itself, how did you get there?
So there's plenty of different ways to figure out which episodes are best, and a lot of them would probably take a good amount of time to actually do. I could do a Metacritic approach and take a bunch of different rankings, aggregate them, and come up with averages. But as we know, in the world of Community, the end-all be-all for every ranking has to be IMDb. Luis Guzman was great in it, so that was good enough for me. I then tried to figure out, well, how could we create different brackets, so to speak? And by brackets, I'm sorry, I mean regions, because generally in the college basketball tournament, there's a West, East, South, Midwest. So given the number of episodes in each season, I felt like seasons 1, 2, and 3, being those longer runs, they could each be their own quote-unquote region. And then 4, 5, and 6 would be, it would be kind of a really long season, but we could put all 3 of those together and have them fight for the top rankings. So from there, I just looked at the average ranking for each episode according to IMDb and just put them in a list, took the top 16. In most cases, I did put my finger on the scale in one case, and I'll talk about it later. And we got some really interesting results. And part of what we hope to talk about today is, as is the case with every college basketball tournament, these teams or these episodes really should have gotten in. Someone somewhere along the way badly misjudged their value, and they are left out of the tournament. And as well, a couple that got in that maybe should not have. That always is the case. If you're a college basketball fan, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So we'll definitely approach that topic here too.
It's always a great place to start the discussion, but, before we totally segue out of your first point, when you first pitched this, I agreed with your concept to combine multiple seasons into one region, due to the argument of having fewer episodes. But then when I actually started looking at the episodes deeper, I realized something else, which, we're going to hash all this out, but at least from my perspective, it seemed like even with your realignment, there was an inherent disproportionate value for certain stretches of the show if we're organizing them in a chronological order, right? So hopefully this helps to resolve some of that as well. I think that combining 4 through 6 hopefully will, leave us in the place where we have the same kind of disagreements and contentions and stuff that I know for sure we're going to have in some of the other brackets. So I'm on board with doing it that way. Obviously we want to hear everyone's feedback, but I think that's a really good place to start.
And let me just add real quickly, sorry to cut over you there, but I put 4, 5, and 6 together, like I said. Originally, in the very first version of the bracket, I did not even include season 4, but I felt like that was a big mistake, and I wanted to put it in there. I wanted it to be represented because there are certainly good episodes from that season, and in fact, one of the cases, I actually put in an episode of season 4 that was ranked lower than a season 6 episode. But again, I just wanted to make sure that it had at least 3 episodes represented. So that was where I came from on that.
So even within that region for the latter seasons, there's a representative sample from those 3 seasons, it sounds like.
Roughly speaking, yeah.
So you've said, that you pulled your rankings straight from IMDb, but do you know how they established those rankings? Was it based on feedback, views?
Yeah, it's people get to vote on each episode, and you can give it a ranking. And sometimes I have, specifically when I felt that episodes were ranked too low. And this is prior to this project. And, I thought my 1 vote out of 400 was really going to take it up, a 1/10 of a point or something.
Well, who knows? Maybe after all of this, there will be a larger sample size from which to draw those numbers. We'll see. Was there anything else that you wanted to mention about your process or how we arrived at this point?
I randomly assigned, because as everyone knows, especially fans of particularly good basketball teams, they'll look at, these historically good teams, that is. You'll look at the bracket and everyone determines, oh, this is the hardest bracket. And generally everyone who has a dog in that proverbial fight says, oh, our bracket is the hardest, or that bracket's the hardest, or whatever. So the organization is important, right? To have the top left and the bottom left, those two, the champions of each respective quadrant, will face off against each other. And that is important in terms of the specific matchup that leads to the final, the championship round.
I'm really glad you brought that up, because when I first looked at your bracket, that was the first issue that I took with it.
Okay, good.
If I were saying list my favorite seasons, which we're not going to get into here, my 2 favorite seasons by season are on opposite sides of the bracket. However, the 2 seasons with what I feel are by far the strongest individual episodes are on the same side of the bracket, and that became a real problem for me once I started going through the matchups, because I did end up in a place where one of my semifinal matchups is what I would have considered the best 2 episodes of the show had I been given just an open-ended ticket to pick the best 2 episodes.
So you're saying it's like 2015 and Kentucky is playing Wisconsin in the Final Four and Duke plays the worst Michigan State team ever? That's what happened?
It's a lot like that. And
I'm not bitter about that at all.
No, I'm sure you're not. It's been, plenty of time. But I don't think that I have a horse in this race, but I'm glad you started by bringing that up, because that was my first impression. And then also later, as I actually worked through it, it came back to really matter in the end. So when I was going through the other side, I almost had this mentality like, all right, well, who am I picking to lose in the finals?
Right.
So, that being said, where do you want to start? Do you want to start
Well,
season 1, top
yeah,
left region?
yeah. Let's do that. And I think it makes sense. The way I approached it was, I said, okay, here's because this could be a 3-month arc in and of itself, just discussing which is the top 16 or not. So I said, okay, let me limit to one episode that I really think should be in there that currently is not, and one episode that it could replace, because obviously you can't just add two.
No, that would ruin the math for sure and the entire exercise. So we have to have a zero-sum approach, that's for sure. So what stood out from you for season 1? What was there any you thought didn't deserve to be in the top 16, or any that you specifically felt did deserve to be in the top 16 that were not?
And I'll say this is going to be an exercise in the top 16 episodes in every season are really good. It's not to say that there are bad episodes and don't belong here, but it's just that one was more deserving. And that's certainly the case here in season 1. Communication studies for me. That's kind of the weakest of the episodes in that quadrant of the bracket. And
then that's a 7 seed, right?
correct. So for me, it's a fine episode. It works okay. But just like when I'm filling out my normal brackets, if I'm going against that team, I feel good about my chances. They don't scare me. It's not like this world beater episode. And again, specific to, the actual episode, I just can't stand actors acting like they're drunk unless they're extremely good at it. For me, that really gets in the way of the episode here, particularly when you consider that Politics of Human Sexuality is not in the top 16 according to our methodology, and that is one of the funniest episodes of season 1. For me, it's a dark horse. You could, on a certain day, I would laugh harder at that episode than any other episode in season 1. There's just so much to it, and I don't want to steal all your thunder in case that's your answer as well. And we can talk about it then.
It's not my answer, and with our discussion previously regarding the season openers, I will tell the listeners that we did not discuss our decisions going into this insofar as what we thought needed to be adjusted here. So I will tell you that was not the one that I chose to insert into my season 1 bracket. But
that's wrong, but I'll hear you anyway.
That's fine. Before I get to mine, I want to address yours because, let's see here, we have communication studies as the 7 seed. And just looking at it, on paper, my initial thought is that's probably a little too high for a 7 seed, but it's probably still in the top 16, right? But then you said again, it comes down, you actually have to pick which episodes go below it.
Right, yeah. Oh, and I'm not going to reseed the whole thing once I've put
No. We'll save
that's a good way to get a 3-month arc. Yeah.
Level of insanity. But in the first round, communication studies is actually matched up against a 10 seed, which, if we're going by seedings, you would consider that episode to be favored. So not only is that an episode that you don't think should be in the bracket, but it's actually, by seeding, an episode that would be expected to advance. I actually have communication studies advancing to the second round in my bracket, but that is because of the matchup. Pascal's Triangle Revisited, the 10 seed that it's matched up against, is the episode that I selected to not be one of the top 16 episodes in season 1.
I said earlier you were wrong, and now you're triply wrong. But keep going. I'll give you the space to talk about why you're wrong.
We'll have to bring in a deeper perspective here and a third person who can agree with me when we go into the season 1 bracket and the actual matchups further. But it didn't hit for me. I feel like in almost all ways it was kind of season 1 trying to do all of the things that a regular sitcom's expected to do, and not the stuff that I'm always saying and you're always saying sets it apart from other sitcoms. And for me, it's an episode that I can really live without. So I didn't spend a lot of time agonizing over which episode to drop out.
Right.
When I saw that, I actually had no idea that was going to be matched up against yours there.
Yeah.
But the one that I thought deserved to be in the top 16 that wasn't, I thought you could make a case for the pilot, but I felt like there was a much stronger case to be made for Spanish 101. I
actually make that case. Yeah.
I looked, I was repeatedly looking at the bracket over and over again because I was convinced that it was on there. I was just missing it because it's not necessarily one I would say, I would expect to get to my last couple rounds, but to be not even in the top 16 of season 1 really blows me away. I really like the first iteration of Chang.
I couldn't agree more.
He gets to be the straight man. Obviously he's good at all roles comedically in varying situations, but I really enjoy Chang in season 1 in general, but that's his episode. And then just going farther than that, the montage at the end before it all wraps up, and then we get introduced in the post credits to the first Troy and Abed rap, and just kind of the endearing, expecting that kind of a post credits hug on the way out, and that's just one I enjoy more than the pilot. Probably not as much as the next episode, 3 in the series, but definitely felt that one was a snub for sure. And there's a couple other episodes that I considered swapping out for it, but at the end of the day, Pascal's Triangle was the one that I liked least out of that group, so that was my swap for the season 1 region.
I just want to add on one quick thing here, because it's going to be a theme for me that continues throughout not only the bubble discussion but the whole bracket. Is there are moments in episodes that are the funniest, right? That I still laugh after seeing it 20 times really hard. And for me, sometimes I will choose an episode based on that more than the overall body of the episode. Again, depending on the matchup, just as it would be in a basketball tournament. If you've got one star player who goes off on a given night, you can beat a team that's on paper better than you. So again, just to say that because of my pick right here in particular, the politics of human sexuality, some of the funniest lines of the entire run of this show, I feel like, are in that episode. That's why I give it the snub treatment.
I do always fondly remember the STD fair, and there are definitely some one-liners and scenes that come out of that. So that wasn't one that I felt passionate about getting included, but I certainly wouldn't be the person to argue that over some of the other ones that are in there, for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
So we spent a lot of time on season 1, maybe dabbed a little bit farther into the actual matchups than I was hoping for, but let's head down to the seasons 4 through 6 region, which will be matched up with the season 1 champion in the semifinals. And then also this is our bracket, obviously, that encompasses the 3 different seasons. This one was very, very hard for me. This was the hardest for me. So I'm going to make you start this one again. What did you think about the seasons 4 through 6 bubble teams?
So what I'll say first is that going back to what I first mentioned, I put my finger on the scale here. I took G.I. Jeff off. It was the 16th rated, but I removed it in favor of Herstory of Dance, the season 4 episode, again, to get a little bit better season 4 representation. So it's kind of cheating, sort of, in a way, for me to say that the episode I most would have liked to have on there was actually G.I. Jeff. Because I do like that episode. I know that in listening to... So after listening to 6 seasons in a podcast, Alex interviewed Joel, and Joel really likes the G.I. Jeff episode, and I'm not, that's not just because of that, but his faith in the strength of it, my appreciation of it, I thought that represented an uptick in season 6. I really liked that episode. That would be the one that I would reinsert into the bracket if I could. So, of course, that means that one has to go out, and for me, that choice was Heroic Origins from season 4. It's such a strong concept. I love the idea so much. It's really terrific. Kudos to the writing team for coming up with it, but it just falls flat for me. I think for me, that's honestly the most disappointing episode in the entire run of the show, given that the concept is so strong, and then the execution just falls flat. There was no need to bring magnitude into that and say that his origin was 2 balloons popped when he was sitting in a chair. That's profoundly stupid, and I wish they hadn't done it. And I felt to some degree of that with all of the characters.
Yeah, it definitely felt a little forced. I could definitely see your case for G.I. Jeff. That was one of the episodes that I didn't really enjoy a lot the first watch through, but in retrospect, I feel like a lot of that was because of the stuff that was going on with the show outside of the show at the time, you know?
Absolutely, yes.
And I really think that that was kind of the peak of when that stuff was affecting my actual enjoyment of the episodes. So when I've gone back since then and watched it, that's one of the ones that's definitely grown on me over time. I can definitely see the case for having that included on this bracket, even though the bar's a little higher for seasons 4 through 6, just because there's fewer episodes out of each. I think that definitely deserves to be on here.
Yeah, and what did you think? What was your snub, and which one would you replace it with?
I'm going to completely sign off on your pitch here for two reasons. First of all, because pitch is better than anyone that I had, and also because I want to take this moment to be in full, complete agreement before we move on to the other side of the bracket, which I'm not really expecting us to have super disagreements about, but I think the second side of the bracket is much, much hairier. So let's get to it.
Absolutely. Now, I'm going to make you go first on this half of the bracket, though.
That's fair. That's only fair.
So let's go to top right, season 3.
So we actually have season 2 in top right.
Oh.
Actually, that doesn't matter because, as we've established, to get to the finals, the champion episode from season 2 will have to face the champion episode from season 3. Season 2 was very hard for me in all the opposite ways that seasons 4 through 6 was hard for me, because season 2 is my favorite season. It fits into both the categories of as a complete season, and I think that it offers arguably one of the two best selections of individual episodes as well. It has the highest highs as well as the consistency that I think other seasons don't have. So this one was really hard. There were two episodes that I really, really wanted to get into the top 16. They actually were both in the middle of the season. The first one was episode 13, Celebrity Pharmacology. The second one was early 21st century romanticism. Neither of those landed on the bracket. For me, those are episodes that I consider all-timers. Maybe not the absolute top-tier all-timers, but if I'm thinking of the series as a whole, those are episodes that come to mind. The BNL open from Romanticism episode, not to even speak of everything else that exactly. That's probably my favorite, first 5 minutes of any episode of the series. So, just on that alone, I feel like it deserves a spot. And, Celebrity Pharmacology doesn't quite hit that high, but I just, from start to end, is an episode that always keeps me laughing. Not just when they're delivering the lines, but the facial expressions. I feel like everyone who's not being focused by the camera is all enacting that whole episode, and it always gets me. So the problem is, what do we move out of this bracket of season 2? Because holy cow, it seems logical that we should start working our way back up the seeds, right? Intro to Political Science. Off the top of my head, I would say that's an episode I enjoy. Going through this list, I don't think it belongs in the top 16. And I think this is the only bracket where I can say that there are teams not in the top 16 that I really feel this is just the most bloated of all the regions. As much as it hurts, I would move Intro to Political Science out, and then I can't move down Accounting for Lawyers at 15. I can't move down Mixology Certification. And that brings us to Basic Rocket Science, which, again, is an episode that I enjoy, but just when you stack it up with these others, I think it's got to fall just outside the 16. I know it's the exact opposite of not giving you much from seasons 4 through 6, so what do you think? Where do you want to start digesting all of that, man?
No, that's perfect. I'm glad you worked your way back around to a more correct answer. I wanted to give you the space to do that. I agree with you 100%. Obviously, I chimed in that early 21st century romanticism, like you said, that first 5 minutes goes toe-to-toe with literally any episode in the entire run of the show. It introduces us to the phrase Gravedigger's Biscuits. It's the first appearance of Magnitude. There's 100,000 reasons why that belongs in this top 16 for season 2. Couldn't agree more. The episode I elected to remove was Basic Rocket Science. It just never hit me in the right way. I never got the big laugh. Again, it's a fine episode. It might be the best episode of most other sitcoms, to be perfectly honest. But here in this obligatory bracketology tournament, you've got to be the absolute best of the best to advance. Basic Rocket Science doesn't do that for me. I think they accomplish a lot of other things much better in other episodes.
All right, so that leaves us with the season 3 bubble. I'm gonna invoke host duties and make you finish strong here. What did you have for season 3?
So season 2, as you mentioned, is your favorite season. Season 3 is mine. It is very close. So that made this, again, this whole project really has been just a labor of love, to be perfectly honest. For me, I'll start with the episode that I think needs to be in there. No surprise to anyone who listened to our previous episode. Geography of Global Conflict has a special place in my heart. Just Annie Kim is incredible as a character. Martin Starr is criminally underrated as that type of actor. And gosh, Lionel Richie, the use of that song and having a Chang Britta storyline, just everything works for me. That is Community firing on all cylinders in my book. So that's the one that's got to go in. And like I said, it's such a strong season. It's a little bit tough to pick an episode that doesn't belong there. But if I'd had to, I would say it would be Course Listing Unavailable. That starts the whole Chang is a dictator story arc, which is my least favorite on this show. I'll just go out and say that. Like you mentioned, I loved Chang in season 1. So really, that's all the reason that I have. I love one episode a lot. I don't love the other one. It leads to my least favorite thing that happens in the show.
All right, we did a really good job rounding this out. We had the same selection for what needed to be inserted. Geography of Global Conflict. Rewatching it, it doesn't necessarily have the high heights. It's not from start to finish, but it's an all-timer. It's definitely deserves to be in the top 16 here. I chose a different episode with which to replace it, but it was along the same lines of thinking. The episode I took out was First Chang Dynasty.
I thought that you might.
Course Listing Unavailable was the other one that I was considering. So like I said, kind of a similar train of thought. I think the first half of season 3, large parts of season 3 are the best parts of the show. But unlike season 2, there are episodes in season 3 that just really, really, really miss for me. And, we've touched on that here. So I was planning on this being a super brief bonus episode. It ended up being kind of a medium brief episode, but I'm really excited that we got the time to discuss some of these bubble teams, tease some of the upcoming matchups. I will ask everyone to stay tuned. Keep an eye on Twitter and eye on YouTube. We're going to be following through with this. I'm getting as much help as we can from you guys. And just really excited to hash through all the matchups and see, what kind of conversations and disagreements it sparks, and just really embrace this here for the next several weeks. So anything else you want to pitch in here?
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of disagreements, I would be happy to have folks tell us where we were wrong, which episodes we missed, which ones absolutely belong in there. That's of particular interest to me. We may have glanced over something, or maybe we just didn't want to do another full hour episode on this topic like we could have, and we can agree with you outside of the confines of this recording.
All right, human beings, that does it for this special episode of Apartment 303. As soon as we get this posted, we will have the official brackets also posted to our Twitter account. And tomorrow on our YouTube page, you can check out our official trailer for hashtag 6 Seasons in a Bracket, which will also have links to the brackets. And then next week, we will be releasing the first of our 4-part series, deep diving into each of the 4 bracket regions, starting with the Season 2 region and special guest Jen from the Community Rewatch podcast. As always, Apartment 303 can be found on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, Anchor, wherever you get your podcasts. For Adam, this is Dave signing off. We will see you in our next episode.